Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very, very accomplished professional from the UK, Prerna Wadikar. Prerna, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ashutosh.
Uh, Prerna is an ESG, an environmental, social, and governance expert. She's the first Indian board member of the Central British Fund for World Jewish Relief. She's the founder of the Oxford India Business Conclave. Prerna has pioneered institutional ESG education in India, and she's been recognized, awarded, and felicitated several times. So, Prerna, before we start talking ESG, tell me a little bit about your own journey.
Okay. I call myself as explorer of professional experiences, given my portfolio career across philanthropies, governments, multinational corporates, and social enterprises and not-for-profits. A lot of it was intentional because I was a very voracious reader. I think I continue to be that. And I came across Mark Twain, where he said, there are only two very important days in your life. The first one is the day you're born, and the second is the day you realize why. And I think my quest has largely been first to realize why I am born, what should I be doing? And second is, how can I do it better? And who else is doing it better? And what can I learn from them? So it was this constant quest of improving yourself, incorporating or inculcating the tenets, the virtues, and the values which I admire in others, which took me from one leader to another, one institution to another, one sector to another. So that's largely been my journey.
Amazing. And what got you interested in ESG?
It was a very accidental happenstance, and I'm very thrilled about it, that it happened. So this was when I was working in London with British International Investments. We had a very big ESG team, and they were talking about the importance of managing business risks using ESG. And that's where, when you're at the top of the peak, you realize what is going to impact the rest of the world. I had that strategic advantage being there. And I realized that while this is probably not yet a thing in India, it's not going to be too long before it becomes very, very necessary, or it's mandated regardless of whether or not we like it. And that's what got me interested and engaged in understanding ESG more. Also, my education at Oxford helped me. We had some of the most amazing professors who are leaders of ESG at the moment. Professor Colin Mears, who's leading the responsible business and purposeful leadership philosophy. So it was a combination of all of this. And I would also give huge credit to IIT Gandhinagar. So Professor Deepak Singhania reached out to me just at that time, and he said, hey, we are looking to teach management subjects to our engineering students who want to specialize, do a management minor specialization. And is there some latest subject you would like to teach? And I said, what do you want me to teach? He said, anything that's relevant. I said, are you open for ESG? And luckily the academic committee there approved this course, and that's how the first institutional ESG education started.
Amazing. So for a lot of my viewers and listeners who have all heard the term ESG, help us understand, how do you define environmental, social, and governance, or ESG?
Sure. I think it's also very necessary, Ashutosh, because I do see a lot of people use ESG, CSR, and sustainability in the same breath, very often interchangeably. And they may be complementary, but they are very different, and they help achieve very different goals. And to explain ESG, I'll take a couple of minutes and take you back into history on why it started. And this is in a very recent past, less than 2 decades ago. In 2004, Kofi Annan, who is a Nobel laureate, the 7th Secretary General of United Nations, reached out to 50 of the most powerful, largest financial asset managers of the world. and urged them to consider non-financial factors in their investment decision making.
Okay.
And at that time, these 50 world leaders, asset managers, came together along with the United Nations Global Compact, the Swiss government, and IFC, that's the International Finance Corporation.
Mm-hmm.
And they came up with a report that was titled Who Cares Wins, which looked at the value drivers that environmental, social, and governance factors bring into your business operations and your investment criteria. And that was pretty much the origin or the beginning of ESG. Subsequently, what really formed this up was the launch of the Principles of Responsible Investments in 2006, April, at the New York Stock Exchange, by, again, the same set of individuals and Kofi Annan. So by now, you already are aware that this was created for the financial community, largely by them, to incorporate what I would like to call the emoji characters into the financial decision making.
Right.
Because all the environmental, social factors are not quantifiable, not easily measurable, and not standardized. And they're often referred to as the emojis in the financial world. So how do you use emojis to make your corporate decisions? And IFC actually defines ESG as a set of environmental, social criteria and governance considerations by companies for their operations and by the investors for their investment decision making, taking into consideration the risks, the opportunities, and the impacts.
Very interesting. And when you talk of ESG strategies, or when people talk of ESG strategies, and ESG has become the new buzzword everywhere in the corporate world, are these strategies working, or is this a lot of talk?
Recently there's this organization called Global Data. It's a British publicly listed firm into data analytics and consulting. And they did a survey of some of the top global organizations across 16 sectors. And the results were not shocking or nothing surprising there, because only 16% of those surveyed said that they believe ESG is going to impact their business in the immediate future. And more than 60% of those surveyed said that their leadership is not serious about ESG, which you also see globally in all the regulations. There are great regulations made, but their enforcement as well as their implementation is lacking, is weak, or not yet defined to be effective. Answering your questions, are companies serious? Some of them are. I won't say it's a blanket yes or a blanket no.
I agree.
Yeah, but a lot of them are still grappling to understand what it means for their business, how it is going to benefit their business. And majority of them are considering this as yet another regulatory mandate to be complied to, rather than incorporating it in their organizational strategies.
Fascinating. And, when you talk about training the corporate leaders or corporate world on ESG, what goes into this training?
So the way I see the industry, and, I speak with a lot of them, the first thing that they want to understand is, what is ESG? Because that itself is such a big, undefined, uncertain, and very vague concept in the industry at the moment. The second thing they want to know is, how does it impact my business? What's in it for me to incorporate it in my company? And then the third thing, and very critical thing that they all are at the moment looking for, is, where do I begin? What should I do? So these are the three main things that go into, a lot of what we teach at IIM Bangalore for working professionals. But also, besides this, which framework for reporting would be most relevant for my organization? Which ESG rating criteria should I consider in my company? How can I improve my ESG rating score? Should I even be bothered about my ESG rating score, given that they are so vague and so diverse and very practically, if you look at them collectively, they don't make any sense. And what I've seen specifically with working professionals who come to take this course is they're very keen to understand how does ESG affect their function, their current role in their organization, and also interestingly, what is it they can do to contribute to the company's ESG targets and goals in their capacity of leadership, whatever they're doing.
And Prerna, when you talk of targets and ratings, are these done by external agencies or is it self-imposed by leadership?
So targets typically are very company focused, and they evolve as your company matures in its ESG integration, adoption and implementation. So you can start with something as basic as, let's see how many men and women we have at each level in our organization.
Correct.
And then you go into a more nuanced aspect of, are we creating those opportunities for growth, equal pay, equity, respectable work culture? So as you progress on the ESG parameter, your targets and goals will become more sophisticated. But the ratings is at the moment done by third-party agencies. There are lots of them. There is Sustainalytics, there's MSCI, there's also individual reporting organizations who rank companies on their compliance or their achievement of a certain parameter within the ESG factors. And companies often use that in their marketing and their communications to say that, hey, we are, top company in this particular rating, or top among these global corporations focused on this consideration.
Yeah, interesting. And, a few minutes back, you were telling me about how Mr. Kofi Annan reached out to so many private equity firms. My question to you is, why is ESG so important for financial markets?
I think, for a long time, it was Milton Friedman's doctrine that ruled, and it continues to rule even today, that ESG, the sole purpose of business is to increase shareholders' wealth. So shareholder wealth maximization has been the corporate focus, which we have seen has led to a lot of social disruptions, as well as inequalities, if I may put it in a very simplistic term.
Yeah.
And ESG tries to create this or include stakeholders into the consideration of your business growth and business expansion, not just shareholders. So the movement or the transition from shareholder wealth maximization to stakeholder value creation is ideally the objective of ESG. And why it matters to businesses, there's enough evidence that in ESG focused companies, when I say ESG focused companies who've integrated ESG very strategically in their business operations and growth criteria, do have a stronger resilience to unanticipated shocks, externalities, as well as long-term sustainability. However, I would like to quote Ken Melman, who's the global impact head of KKR here, in a very recent interview in CNBC. He said, we incorporate ESG because it makes us better investors and gives us higher returns on investments.
Okay.
So the focus still remains the return on your investments for investors. It's just that because you look at environmental, social, and governance aspects, it allows you to look at risks you would otherwise not consider in your financial books. And it allows you to look at a company more holistically than mere numbers in your accounting and your balance sheet.
Wow, very interesting. And, since ESG has been under discussion for almost 15, 20 years, what is your own assessment of the short-term impact ESG has had and the long-term impact ESG is likely to have?
I would say ESG is still evolving. 15 years is very, very nascent. It's probably not even a toddler yet.
Correct.
And you can see that with the ESG soup, which is basically all those reporting standards, rating agencies, regulatory frameworks. complementary, confusing, sometimes complex as well in their definitions and implementations. So in the short term, I think it is about looking at how ESG can create value for the larger ecosystem and getting the adoption for businesses seriously and not just a tick box exercise, which it largely remains today. But in the long term, I do not see ESG as a standalone function in a company. By now, you probably have a vague idea that ESG touches every function, every department in a company. It cannot be one-man team or a corner office reporting to the CEO. And there have already been, a lot of work being done by professors like Professor Colin Mayer, who were leading, creating thought leadership around responsible leadership or purpose-driven enterprises. And when you incorporate ESG considerations right into how you want to be as a business and how you want to be as a leader, you will not need a third-party department to enforce it and report it and capture it. It will be your way of doing business. And I think that's where ESG will terminate or end. It will probably become non-existent, but right now we are in the very beginning initial stages where we do need regulators, we do need rating agencies, we do need those carrots to entice corporations to consider ESG and incorporate it.
Interesting. I was speaking to a very senior corporate leader and I asked him about ESG and he said, yeah, we have a policy in place. So I said, but who's accountable? Right. He says, oh, there are many people in the organization, but we've made our CHRO accountable. So I'd love to get your perspective since you just told me that it touches everybody in an organization.
Right.
Where does accountability lie?
It's a very interesting question you ask, Ashutosh. This is the first question I ask in my, the executive course. First, do you have somebody who's, given the responsibility of ESG and who does that person report to? I've seen very big names report, their ESG person reports to the marketing head, their ESG person reports to the HR, their ESG person reports to CEO at times. And I feel the most, it's a statement you're making to the industry about how serious you are about your stakeholders in your business. So when your ESG person is reporting to your marketing head, it tells me that you're doing this for marketing, not because you're serious about it.
Correct.
So I feel that very responsible organizations, both in India and abroad, have an individual sustainability head in their companies. This person almost always reports to the CEO, and the accountability, I believe, should be with the CEO because it has a major aspect of governance, which has to deal with the board. And unless you empower that team member in your organization to have the authority to get things done from the board and with the board, it best lies with the CEO.
Well said. My next question to you is on culture. And you live in a country which is incredibly culturally diverse. And different countries, different cultures respond differently to ESG. I want to get your perspective on how does culture impact ESG?
I would flip the question and say, how should ESG be considerate about cultures, both of corporations, of industries, as well as geographies? Because we live in a very complex, interdependent, multipolar world at the moment.
Correct.
And if you look at it, in London, I won't say of all industries, but there are specific industries where you do not work after 5 p.m. You do not call your colleagues on the weekends, no matter how urgent or important it is. You're not responsible for giving time to your boss immediately, and you can question authority, of course, respectfully, but you can question decisions made by your boss or someone higher up in the organization. If you look at the global south, whether it's India or China or Japan, we take great pride in being available 24/7 for our bosses, for our work. Indian culture talks about work is worship, as does not in so many words, but Japanese culture is also very demanding when it comes to work ethics, Korean cultures as well. So now when you look at a Western company trying to say that 40-hour work week does not mean that people who are working 80 hours in the global South are exploiting their human resources or are violating human rights. That's the culture. And that ESG definition should have that flexibility to incorporate and be respectful of other people's way of life and way of work, and not enforce those on the countries simply because you are at a power or a position where you can demand.
What a great response. Thank you. I have time for two more questions, Prerna. My next question is about the young, the millennials and the Gen Zs who are now getting into leadership roles in the corporate world. And I'm from the boomers generation, but I often say that it is the young leaders who are bringing in a breath of fresh air into almost every organization. What is their perspective and view on ESG?
As a millennial who deals a lot with the Gen Z, both academically and work-wise, I'm very proud of the Gen Z particularly, because they are very vocal. They are not hesitant in calling out superficial attempts where they see one. I won't deny there is a lot of wokeism as well, which comes with its fair share of criticism. But largely, it's the Gen Z who are responsible for the shifting trends in the work behavior that we are seeing today, and very rightly required as well. The first one is moonlighting. A lot of them are saying that if you can be a CEO in your company and a board member in 10 others, why can't we do our work and do something else if it's not a conflict of interest?
Well said.
Remote working, work-life balance. So yes, work is worship, but you cannot take an employee for granted. So, I think it is the Gen Z who are demanding this, who are, using their authority and their power to ensure that corporates take them seriously. We also saw that in the mass quitting that US recently faced, and also a lot of its impact in India. So I'm completely with you. Gen Z is very promising. Gen Z is also very focused on sustainable production and consumption. So that is also leading to a lot of greenwashing. You have carbon neutral ice cream shops, carbon neutral coffee shops. It's nice in theory, but how practical are they? How real are they? Because you are importing coffee beans from somewhere. You are using electricity to, grind your coffee beans and make them. So it's also, for me, from a very technical point, leading to a lot more greenwashing than you would want to see.
Well said. Well said. And my last question to you, Prerna, and this is for the many, many people who will listen to our conversation. Based on your own incredible journey, your own amazing understanding of ESG, what would you say are 3 lessons you want our viewers and listeners to take away?
I think the first one, I would reiterate that ESG, CSR, and sustainability are not the same. So please don't use them interchangeably. The second is that you will not see the effect of ESG if you take it as a tick box exercise only. ESG, it's scientifically proven. There's enough evidence that ESG shows its benefits only when it's incorporated in the core strategy and operations of your business. And thirdly, ESG is here to stay in one form or another. Today, 70% of our top 500 listed companies on the Standards and Poor have ESG considerations incorporated in their business in the employee compensation. So if you have not yet started looking into ESG, it's probably the time you should.
Wonderful. And on that note, and your 3 very, very amazing lessons. Number 1, ESG, CSR, and sustainability are not the same. I think that's so important for people to know. The second one you said was ESG shows its benefits if it is in the strategy of a company over a period of time. And the third one you said is ESG is here to stay. Thank you, Prerna, for talking to me about your own journey, about so much that's happening in the world of ESG. I mean, I learned so many new things from you today. Thank you for talking to me about culture and the millennials and the Gen Zs. Thank you again for speaking to me, and good luck.
Thank you so much, Ashutosh. It was really great to be on your talk show, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.